Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first day of school. We're excited to have you here. All right. Tonight, the Board of Trustees is meeting in a called work session board meeting. The board welcomes and appreciates comments and input from the community. Open forum is provided at each meeting to allow the public to address the board. There will be 2 open forums tonight. Open forum number 1 is to hear requests regarding agenda items only. Open forum number 2 is to hear requests or make comments regarding non-agenda items and will be heard at the end of the meeting. Those addressing the board are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes per meeting. The speaker should identify his or her name, group affiliation, if any, and make a brief presentation with an identified solution if one is sought. Remarks should be addressed to the board as a whole. Oral presentations may not include charges against any employee or board member by name. It is my responsibility to determine if a person addressing the board has attempted to resolve a concern informally or through the district's complaint policies. If not, the speaker will be directed to follow the appropriate policy. The board requests that all presentations be made in a courteous, respectful, and professional manner and asks that speakers monitor their own behavior. If you wish to speak at one of the open forums, please fill out one of the cards located on the table in the entry hall. Dr. Harrington, any comments?
We had a great first day of school. The ELT got out and visited all the campuses and just saw a lot of excited kids, a lot of excited teachers and principals. So it was a good first day. We had our end of the day enrollment meeting, and our first day warm body count is right on target. So I know there had been some concerns bubbling in the area about numbers. Our numbers are here. And so we're excited, and we'll be ready to go for day 2.
All right, good deal. All right, any clarification is required?
None at this time.
Okay. We're ready for open forum number 1. Nothing. So at this time, the board will adjourn to closed session pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The board will adjourn into closed session pursuant to sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.076. At this time, the board will reconvene into open session. It's time for reports and presentations. Disbursements for the month of July 2024. Did any board member have a question on that? All right, item 6.02, 2024 certified property values as of July 25th, 2024. Mr. Williams?
All right, good evening. This certified property values and the tax rate impact. Not a lot really to show here, but I did a little presentation to make it a little easier. You've got the certified values in your packet. You can see from tax year 2023 to tax year 2024, which is the current year, you've got three values there: appraised value, net taxable value, and estimated net taxable value. The most important number there is that bottom one, the estimated net taxable value. That's the number that we report to TEA each year, and they calculate the maximum compressed tax rate from that. And you can see that it was a 4.64% increase over last year's number. And then below there, you can see what's included in those numbers. That's significantly less of an increase from last year. Of course, you remember last year we had a $40,000 exemption and then the $100,000 exemption when that all switched and changed. So last year, comparing apples to apples, the rate in the property value increase was 13.87% increase or something like that, comparing the 40,000 to the 40,000. Now we're comparing the 100,000 exemption to the 100,000 exemption. So, of course, that's what drives our tax rate. Last year, you can see the House Bill 3 compression was put our tax rate at 74.25. Compared to this year was 62.26 for the MCR. But last year, you'll recall that the legislature added an additional 10.7 cents of compression, which we do not have this year. So comparing apples to apples, our MCR from last year was 63.55. This year, you're looking at 62.26. That's all determined by the state. That's a 1.29 cent decrease. Of course, we add to that our 5 golden pennies. So our M&O tax rate for this year will be 0.6726 compared to 0.6855 last year. And then the INS tax rate last year, in previous years, we were at 23.56. This year, we are recommending 29.63. That is a 6.07 cent increase, but the net for the total tax rate is a little less than a 5 cent increase. And of course, that INS rate increase is due to selling the bonds that we just sold, and that is within what we told our public we would do. So, and that's really it for this report, unless you have some questions.
No question, just a comment, Delby, and it piggybacks off of what you just said about that's what we told our public that we would do. Mm-hmm. I don't think that should be lost in this. I mean, and also I would encourage us to keep our website up that has the bond information that shows the projected maximum tax rate that we anticipate from the bond election. Absolutely. And in 2024, we said our maximum anticipated tax rate would be 0.9741, and we're below that. So not only did we do what we told the public we would do, we came below that. Right. And I think that's important to keep at the forefront of this. We knew that there would be a bump on the INS rate, but it's approved by the voters, and it ended up being less than we anticipated the maximum to be.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
All right. Good points, Chris. Any other questions? All right. Then item 7.01, financial statements for the month of June 2024.
All right, got a little bit different look, got the new Catalyst background. So we're going to be looking at the financial statements ending June 30th, 2024. For the general fund, we have a fund balance at the end of June of $168,889,280. That represents expenditures over revenues in the amount of $2,306,368. The investment interest revenue, of course, that's kind of our highlight this year, is investment interest earnings. For this reporting period was $6,262,817 compared to $5,266,884 last year. Total expenditures at the end of May was at 77.30, and as you can see by my little numbers up there in the corner, at 10/12ths, or almost through the entire 12-month year, that's 77% is below the 83%, which would be where we're at for 10/12ths of the year. So this fund is performing as expected. Then moving to the general fund expenditure matrix, payroll, we're sitting at $146,405,460. That's at 86%. Like I said, we say year in and out that typically runs 87, 88%. That's a little less now because sorry, Allison, but our insurance costs are a little higher than they have been in past years. So that's, of course, skewing those numbers a little bit. Utility cost, $3,482,790 are at 2%. Instructional supplies, $2,786,633 are also at 2%. And the other expenditures, which includes the over $1 million increase in property insurance costs from last year, that's a little right at 2% also. Child Nutrition Fund continues to do well. That fund balance is $9,708,626. That represents revenues over expenditures in the amount of $3,145,266. They're operating very normal. Turnover it's running about the same. I think this month we were sitting at about 13 openings, which is pretty normal for child nutrition with the number of employees they have in that department. But at the end of June 30th, they were at 82.17% of budgeted. Again, that's almost up there at that 10/12%, but they're pretty much done for the year. They're not going to grow anymore from that. So it's performing as expected. Debt Service Fund, that fund balance is $62,119,183. That's revenues over expenditures in the amount of $40,582,962. Of course, we made our first debt service payment back in February, and our next one is due later this week, but it has already been processed and sent out, so that's done and in the books. Our total debt service for this year was $46,318,855. Tuition-based pre-K fund, that fund balance is $507,782. That's revenues over expenditures in the amount of $318,306. Revenue received as of the end of June was at 105.15% of budgeted, so well over what we budgeted. Total expenditures were at 74.33%. And as we close out that budget, that will pretty much eat up the rest of that. But that fund is performing as expected also. The special revenue funds, as you know, are several different federal and state funds, grant funds. Those funds are, as of end of June, we're at 59.97%. But like I say, a lot of those funds roll over from year to year. So those numbers tend to look a little different when you're looking at it on a percentage basis. The expenditures exceed revenues due to the lag in state reimbursements. Spend it first and then get the state to reimburse us later. But all of those funds are tracking normally and as expected. Campus activity funds, fund balance $3,240,237. That's expenditures over revenues in the amount of $91,045. The revenues for the period increased by $102,000, while the expenditures increased by $148,000. So again, spending a little more than they took in, but it's that time of year. At the end of the year, that's always what happens. That fund is also performing normally. 2018 bond fund, I keep saying it's going to go away. As soon as we get those last invoices, this fund will get closed out, but we're still waiting on those. So not much left in that. Fund balance of $562,432. Most of that will get eaten up when we get those last invoices in for technology. This represents expenditures over revenues in the amount of $1,459,930. Sound like a broken record? But that fund is, like I say, about to get closed out, but it's running the way it should. The new bond fund, the 2024 bond fund. Of course, we sold, that fund balance is $585,035,481. That represents revenues over expenditures in the amount of $586,457,183. As you know, we issued bonds in the amount of $600 million back in February, received the funds in March. We did reimburse for expenses up to that point with a reimbursement resolution. And then this one is where you really are making some money with the interest earnings. We've made $8,896,807 since receiving the 2024 bonds in March. And now what we are doing is working really hard to try to hit expenditure requirements for arbitrage, to try to avoid as much arbitrage as possible. And for those that may not understand arbitrage basically it's IRS says if you're going to you can't borrow money at this, reinvest it at a higher rate, and you can't keep all that interest unless you follow all these rules and stuff. The IRS wants their cut, basically. So we're working as hard as we can to try to make that happen. I'm working with Josh and Juris and everybody else. So the locally defined capital projects fund, that fund balance is $29,781,807. That represents expenditures over revenues in the amount of $17,560,948. They're currently, as you know, being used for Bel Air rebuild, Trinity Bell baseball, softball, all that, which is pretty much done. And then we've got a few little projects maybe still ongoing that are coming out of this fund. Now, what I might note here too is that as soon as we get totally done with Bel Air, that excess will come back into this fund on that build stuff. We're not going to hit what we budgeted to spend out of here, so that'll put a little bit of money back into this fund. So. And that should be it. Any questions there?
All right. Any questions on the financial statements?
Toby, one request on the 2023 bond funds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are broken out. They aren't broken out by project. At some point in time, you know, either quarterly or as we move forward with the projects, so we get a breakdown, another level here, so we can see the expenditures by project and not just as a whole fund.
Sure. Yeah, we could run that report. It's not a big deal.
All right, thank you. 7.02, RFP 23-18B, Event Planning Services Supplemental. Mr. Kerbo?
Good evening, Mr. Romero, Dr. Harrington, and members of the board. Thank you again for the chance to bring these items to you. This is just a catch-all service agreement for folks that help us with events or convocation, all of our end-of-year banquets or during-the-year banquets, and so forth. So this is to secure services of vendors that help out in that.
Any questions? All right, RFP 24-14, General Retail Merchandise, Grocery Supplies, Equipment, and Services.
This is a replacement bid for one that's expiring at the end of this month, and so we go through and solicit basically the same folks and hope that they respond, and we've got a pretty good response on this one. But this allows us to buy from local retailers for all of our campus and departmental needs.
Okay, any questions? All right, RFP 24-18, Printing Services.
This is also an as-needed service RFP to secure printing services, things like business cards, envelopes, things that we need that are what campus printing needs and departmental printing needs.
All right, any questions on the printing services? All right, 7.04, Extension of Property and Casualty Insurance Award.
Okay, we've been preparing you for this increase, and it's come. So this is our last year on our current agreement for property and casualty insurance. So you can see our premium cost is increasing by $244,867. It's actually, if you want to, let me try to explain it to you. It's actually a rate reduction, but our property values have increased because of some properties that we've acquired and so forth. So it's a net increase, but it's less than what we anticipated.
Okay, any questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Kerbo.
Thank you.
7.06 VMware software. Dr. Hopkins?
Good evening. So we are here with VM software. This isn't something that we have historically had to bring to the board, but with some changes, broadband acquired VM, which caused the price to increase significantly, and therefore it meets the threshold for board approval. VMware is a cloud-based server that we use. It has enabled us to move a lot of our critical mission services off of our data center and into the cloud. So it has saved us a lot of utility costs in the long run as far as hardware and air conditioning, but we still very much need the service.
All right, any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
7.07 secondary school resource officers interlocal agreement.
Good evening. So what we have here is a shift from an SRO contract to an SRO interlocal agreement to match the things that we do on the facilities and maintenance side of things. Specifically, this is separating the elementary and the secondary. So we will be bringing you elementary moving forward, hopefully soon as we're able to hammer out that. Also, it's important to note that the additional personnel that we had for the elementary, those were 3 SRO officers, that agreement's still in place and will remain in place until we bring you the elementary SRO.
All right, any questions? Thank you, Dr. Johnson. 7.08 application for expedited state waiver. Are there any questions on this? 7.09 renewal of general legal services contract, bracket Nellis PNC. All right, any questions on this agreement, this contract? Okay, we're ready for action items. Consider approval of notice of public meeting to discuss budget and proposed tax rate for 2024-2025. Mr. Williams.
Okay, this is the approval of the notice that will go in the paper for our upcoming budget and tax rate that we'll vote on at the next board meeting. Presented you a very detailed explanation. If you read that, it'd been good sleeping material to make you go to sleep last weekend. So anyway, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Just keep in mind that once we publish this, we can adopt a lower rate, but we cannot adopt a higher rate than what we publish in the paper.
All right, so this is one of the things that we do every year. Does anyone have any questions on this year's version? All right, thank you, Ms. Williams. Consider approval, oh, sorry, we need to do an action, don't we? All right, I'll accept a motion.
I move the board approve the notice of public meetings to discuss budget and proposed tax rate for 2024-2025 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the notice of public meetings to discuss budget and proposed tax rate for 2024-2025 as presented. Please vote. And that motion passes. 8.02, consider approval of oh, sorry. You're right. A public hearing and discussion on the budget and tax rate will be held on August 26, 2024. Notice of the public hearing will be submitted to the newspaper for publication on Thursday, August 15, 2024. Budget adoption and setting the tax rate is scheduled to follow the public hearing and discussion at the board meeting on August 26, 2024. All right, now we're ready for 8.02. Consider approval of RFQ 24-15, Construction Management Consultant Services. We had this on our last agenda and got moved here so Josh could be here to explain it to us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So we're asking for approval of the RFQ. RFQ is for us to be able to qualify for augmented services or for the consulting services, anything that would be able to help us throughout the bond process. Part of this would be for project controls, being able to help us with evaluating pricing pay applications, anything like that that would be able to do. Also, there's other services in there. If we need to utilize those at any given time, this would provide that belt and suspenders to be able to help us as we might need that. And that would be project managers or field observations, things like that, if it was needed.
So this would be approving the RFQ, and then it would go to Josh to then negotiate a contract to then bring back to you. So this is just approving for him to enter into negotiations with that company, that we have approved their qualifications.
Very similar to what we've done with the architects, engineers prior to. We don't know exactly what all the scope would be, but we'd be able to tell you so we can move forward to be able to have those negotiations and talk in more detail. Then we bring that back, and if we have to change, we would be able to, we'd make those changes with you and make you aware.
All right, any questions?
Just a comment, I would hope that we are able to bring this contract back quickly, because I'd like to see the scope of the contract, I'd like to see the price of the contract to know exactly what we're getting and what we're paying for. But generally speaking, I think that this is something that we need to press quickly. I've been critical on some of the pieces of the pay apps and the change orders and some of the project management and the contract oversight, and I think this fills that gap. So I'm really excited to see this. So I want to go forward, get this approved so we can get the contract in place and take a look at it.
I would greatly appreciate that as well.
All right, any other questions? And I'll accept the motion.
I move the board approve RFQ 2415 for construction management consulting services to HORE Program Management LLC as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve RFQ 24-15 for construction management consulting services to HORE Program Management LLC as presented. Please vote. That motion passes. 8.03, consider approval of update to 2024-2025 staffing table. Ms. Tuttle?
So we are we are requesting this evening 3 teacher assistant units and 1 teacher unit. So the teacher and 1 teacher assistant are in our FOSSI program at Meadow Creek based on enrollment. And then we also are in need of a bilingual pre-K teacher assistant at Bel Air and a teacher assistant pre-K at Trinity Lakes. And those are the 4 units we're asking for your approval on tonight. Any questions?
Are there any questions on these additional units? I'll accept the motion.
I move that the board approve the new units as submitted.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the new units as submitted. Please vote. And that motion passes. 8.04, consider approval of donations for the August regular board meeting presentation and certificates of appreciation. Any questions on any of the certificates? I'll accept the motion.
I move the board approve the August 2024 donations as presented.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the August 2024 donations as presented. Please vote. And that motion passes. We're ready for open forum number 2. No cards. All right. 10.01, opportunity for board members to request items be placed on future board agendas. Anybody have anything?
I do have one item, and we discussed it briefly. I talked about it with Joe earlier today, and there is a little bit of misinformation and questions on our cell phone policy in relation to what the media is picking up, not only for us, but other school districts. And so not a pressing issue. It doesn't need to be next meeting, but at some time this fall, I'd like to have a overview of our cell phone policy and a review of how our campuses are handling the discretionary aspects of that, and then in comparison to our neighboring school districts, just to give some information not only to us but also to the public.
All right. All right, so we have a motion, request in a second, so we'll get that on a, got it all, Joe? All right. Okay, review board activity chart. I have not looked at this yet. Have you had a chance to look at it? No. July, August. It looks like we have at least one person going to every event on here through July. Through August.
We went back in time.
Yeah. So that's the end of this. End of this calendar. So.
And then the next one is in September.
Yeah. Okay. All right. 10.303 discussion of updating, evaluating, and improving student outcome EISO board goals. Julie and Chris.
Sure. So I think we all know SB 1566 requires us to participate in EISO training, evaluating, and improving student outcome every 2 years. And there's really 5 key areas that we have to look at. That's early childhood literacy, early childhood mathematics, college career and military readiness, special ed, and emergent bilingual. And so the last student outcome goals that we put together were in 2020, 2021. And our goal team met with Joe and Lydia and Dr. Allen to come up with updating the goals in these key areas. And so we're going to be seeing these to vote on next meeting. But this is the presentation on what those goals are going to look like. And I know that Dr. Allen is here this evening to walk us through those recommended goals.
Don't look surprised.
Hi, good evening. Hi. So these are just listed right here for you, not too much of a story behind them. Where we came up with the goals was we looked at the history of previous years and what was typical growth we would expect to see in a given year. And then we tried to say, based on that, what is a reasonable goal to set for the future? They spread out over the next 5 years. And so, and so then once we had our goal that we thought for the overall population we wanted to get in the next 5 years, we then looked at each of our subpopulations and looked at where there were gaps and where we needed to close gaps. And so we might have altered those a little bit here and there. So if the overall goal was a +3, you might see anywhere from a +2 to a +4 to work on closing those gaps. So this, we'll start with early childhood literacy. This is the overall outcome goal. So this is based on the 3rd grade STAR reading. And then these break down into progress measures by looking at each grade building up to 3rd grade. So we have pre-K, and this is based off the CLI, and specifically the rapid letter naming subtest of CLI. And then similarly for kinder 1st and 2nd, in reading, this is based off BASS, which is where the students are reading and it's more of a comprehension exam than the DIBELS, which is a lot of the phonics and stuff like that. And so then here's 1st. Asterisk means there were less than 10 students in that group. And 2nd grade. And then so similarly for math, we have a 3rd grade outcome goal. So that's of course STAR for 3rd grade, built the same way as the STAR reading. And then we have the progress measures building up to that. So we have pre-K through 2nd grade. Pre-K is CLI again, and this is based on their overall math subtest. And then we have some fun with kinder 1st and 2nd math progress measure. We have been using M-Class math for the last several years as our screener in kinder 1st and 2nd grade math. This year, we are changing. We're not using M-Class Math anymore, and we're moving to expanding MAP to those younger grade levels. So we will have to determine a new baseline. And as you guys all know, MAP is norm reference, not criterion reference. So we'll also really have to look at how we want to define success and how we want to set those goals. So that will be more fun to come. And here's first and second grade. For CCMR, this is looking at, do they get the point in any way? It doesn't have to be from college or career or military, just do they get the point overall? So that's how we looked at these goals moving forward. And then the special education slide and the emergent bilingual slide will look a little bit differently because they are already their own subpopulation, so these aren't then broken down further by subpopulation. And so you'll just see for every grade level that has a STAR test, you'll see a goal here, and the same for our emergent bilingual, this was English and math, and then the same for our emergent bilingual population, an English and a math goal.
And although we went through those very quickly, I will say that when we met with Dr. Allen and Lydia and Joe, Chris and I, we went through these very, we took our time going through and oh yeah, sorry.
Yes. I'm sorry, I can go back through them a little more slowly. I apologize.
I don't
Okay.
think this group wants that. I just
Okay.
want them to be sure that we had eyeballs on all of these, and we made changes where we felt like they needed to be changed. So rest assured.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you.